And welcome back to Insemination. I am so excited for our next guest. She is not just an exceptionally wonderful friend of mine, she is an amazing advocate for the donor-conceived community. She is also a therapist and a renowned author. She specializes in infertility trauma and has such amazing advice on how to tell your child that they are donor-conceived. So without further ado, let's bring on Jana Rupnow. So welcome to Insemination, Jana. How are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here, Laura. I'm very excited.
I am so excited to have you here because I have had, I think some of like my best donor conceived talks with you out of like anybody. Aww. I love talking about this subject specifically with you. You're such like a fountain of knowledge, and your history with like, you know, working in this industry, like, you know, with people in this industry is like so vast. So I'm so excited that I get to have a conversation with you that I get to share with the masses.
Sweet. I feel the same way. I feel the same way. And, you know, I've said that to you as well. You get it quickly. You know, I don't have to explain things that 10 years, 15 years of information. So it's refreshing. Yeah.
And so is you. And I think the work that you do is so desperately needed. And I'd love to just jump right in and not keep any of our listeners waiting and just start with first your story. Yeah, because I mean, obviously, so I know that you're not donor conceived, but you are actively part of the baby business as well. So, you know, we are, as I like to say, we're both, we're two siblings of the same dysfunctional family of the baby business.
True. Yes. I'm an adoptee. So I was adopted in infancy, my twin brother and I, and domestic. So in the States here. And back then it was a closed adoption system. Universally, I mean, it just was. And so I grew up not knowing who my biological parents were, and, you know, have a wonderful, loving family. But I was the curious one. I was the one who wanted to know more, you know, the deep thinker, analyze everything. And so I was curious and thought about it a lot. And I didn't really share with my parents how often I thought about it, just because it was my inner world. But I did. And I ended up finding my birth father when I was 23.
Wow.
Went through the court in the state I was born, petitioned a judge. Actually didn't have to go through court. I just actually wrote a letter to the judge, said,
oh my God.
Can I open my record for health reasons? And it was easy in that state. And he granted me the access to those records. So I flew to Montana, where I was born, and went to the courthouse that my mom actually worked in. And the person there behind the register, behind the door, said, "Oh, Jana, I remember you and your brother when you were this tall."
Oh my God.
Like, okay, hi. And she's like, "Here's your birth certificate."
Oh my God.
And I'm looking at my biological father's name for the first time. And I'm like, oh, this is crazy, you know? And so I'm like, now what do I do? And she said, how about looking in the phone book? So she pulls out the phone book.
A phone book! I love it!
Looks to the page. There he is. I mean, there he is. And I got his phone number. And then I actually had somebody help me contact him. I didn't want to do it myself. So I had a psychologist I had met on an airplane 2 years prior. He was meeting his birth mom for the first time in New York City. And we traded, and he was from the area. Long story short, he ends up connecting and calling my birth father. My birth father went to meet him in his office, and he did that for the first time. So it was great. It took the pressure off me to not have to have like this person say, "Get out of my life. Don't ever contact me again."
The buddy system can be great. It really absolutely activate the buddy system when contacting genetic family.
Yes, absolutely. And so that was my story as a personal. So I got into therapy and I started in the adoption field. So I was counseling adoptees, families who were actually infertile, and then moving on to a non-traditional way of building their family. I got into that because I had gone through that. My husband and I had our first son without any trouble, and then we couldn't get pregnant a second time. We had secondary infertility. And so I was finishing up my graduate program, doing my internship, and just drawn to that. You know, I started working with the agency that we adopted through. And when I saw the families that were infertile and trying to adopt, and just saw the pain that they were all going through. So adoption stopped. International adoption really kind of came to a halt in about 2006.
Hmm.
And that's when I was talking to my fertility doctor at the time. And he said, "Have you thought of donor conception counseling?" And so I was like, "Well, what is it?" And he told me. And I'm like, there's a lot of overlap. That makes a lot of sense, because
Yeah.
at the time they were even calling it back in the day like semi adoption, donor conception.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that that's a phrase that a lot of people do not like to use nowadays. Like we don't want to
Yeah.
recognize that, but it is like there is half an adoption. There absolutely is, and so it was more normalized a couple decades ago. That's really interesting.
Yeah, they used to call it that. I know back in like the time of, I think, Peter Bonney, him, he was I think he was born in 46 or something,
Hmm.
and they called it semi adoption. In some areas they did call it semi adoption. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were seeing all this. You were seeing the essentially, as I like to say, the Venn diagram of adoption and donor conception.
Yeah.
You obviously already had your story. So there was an understanding of missing your genetic. Oh, we didn't even. How did it go with meeting your biological father?
Oh yeah. Jumping all over. It went really good. So we had a good connection, and his personality is more like mine, I think,
Wow.
than like my birth mother. So connected with his family, and I think the first call or the second call with him, all of his brother and his sisters were there, and they literally passed me around
Oh my
and like here in the
goodness.
phone and like passed me around. I got to talk to every one of them, and they were all so sweet and so excited, and it was really wonderful. So
Oh
yeah, that was.
my god.
I didn't meet my birth mom though, my biological mom, until 20 years later, because
Wow.
she had another set of twins that were only 10 years old at the time. And she hadn't I learned later she hadn't told her husband yet that she had placed
Oh my god.
babies for adoption, so he didn't know. So I was a secret still in that family, until later when they divorced, and then I met her when I was 40. So
How did that feel? That's a complex cookie right there.
it was hard because you know there was just a lot of unknowns. Like, why she didn't come out and tell me that at the time.
Yeah.
She just like wrote a letter, and there was just never a mention of "I want to meet you" or anything. And so it
Mhm.
was just sort of unsaid, like, it ends here for now. So
Oh,
it's just weird.
jeez.
There's just a lot of unknown and a lot of just trying to figure things out and not really having an answer.
So
So
secrecy definitely is a theme here.
yeah. Yeah, you can see why I I talk so much about secrecy, and I try
Yes.
to get people to be open, because you know what? I naturally I'm not a lover of secrets. I'm really just like it all to be out in the open
Mhm.
and transparent. It's just so much easier and it's more freeing. So,
Well, and we both know, and I'm sure we're going to talk about more about it, but the fact that the at least the infertility industry thrives on secrecy, has thrived on
yeah.
secrecy, and also, I
Yeah.
mean, the adoption industry as well. But these industries, the baby industry, thrives on let's keep this hush hush because if
Right.
you keep everything secret, then nobody asks any questions and nothing
Yeah.
is discovered. No, and we know as as we've been slowly pulling that veil back and realizing like and we're watching the man behind the curtain, we're realizing, oh shit, this has all been horrific. This is why there's been so
Yeah.
many secrets, is because
Yeah.
of the unethical practices.
And as you talk about it, actually, like, I right here in like that, right under like the top of my stomach, I start to feel sick. Like, I literally, it makes me feel sick because I know what those secrets do to families. They hurt.
Yeah, well, let's go
They
into that.
really hurt.
So let's talk about
Yeah.
your work and what you have been now doing.
Hmm.
And the patients that you have been working with right now. Can you
Yeah.
describe to our listeners what you've actively been doing?
Okay, so now I counsel people before they're going to do a procedure. So they come to me for like this. Some of the doctors are requiring it, but not all. Fertility doctors require the a couple or individual to come to see me prior to doing the procedure. So prior to using egg, sperm, or embryo donation. And I do education. So I will inform them about, and mine's really child focused. So I'm going to tell them what are the
We love a child focus. We love that.
Yeah. Well, it's hard not to be with you're me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that was me. So how could I not? I mean, I brought my lived experience to the table. Yeah. So, yeah, just telling them like, have you thought of the long-term implications and like kind of here's what you want to think about. Here's how things might be, might impact your family in the future. And starting 10 years ago when I started this, I really started with secrecy because most clients, 8 out of 10, came into my office and said, we plan on keeping this a secret from our child. That's what our doctor told us to do. That's all we know to do. Or we just haven't talked about it to anybody. This is going to be a secret, period.
So there's so many things to unpack there. There were so many red flags. God. So first off, the doctor saying keep it a secret.
Yeah,
the doctor.
Were. Yeah.
How? And this was early 2000s.
2010.
Oh God! So this was just over 10 years ago that doctors were saying. Now we know that
they were saying like don't worry about it, just go home and you don't need to think about it. It's not that big a deal. It's your kid.
Oh my God! And this was in 2010.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my.
Most people were coming to me that were planning on keeping it a secret, and I spent most of my energy and time in that hour session, which is all I had, trying to educate them on the harm of secrets. The reason that they should be honest with their child, and to start with honesty. Yeah.
Why, when people would come to you, what would be their reasoning as to why it should be a secret?
Why should their kid know? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. We're going to treat them the same. They're our kid. And isn't it just going to give them more problems if we tell them that? They're just going to be, they're going to feel bad. They're going to feel different. They're going to feel like they're not part of the family. Why would we do that to our kid? Yeah, that was their main reason. And I mean, like I would put myself in their mindset as a therapist and I would be like, okay, yeah, I guess I can see how they don't want their child to suffer. So they think not telling them would cause their child to suffer more than telling them. And I mean, vice versa. I said that wrong. And that they basically thought if they didn't tell them that they would suffer less than if they told them. And that was kind of something that I had to go, okay, like with my lived experience, how do I back this up and explain to them that the harm that can come from this and the damage that they could be doing in their family. And not only that, all I could think about was that kid that's coming into the picture. All I could think about was that kid that wasn't going to know the truth. And it ate me up at night.
And that kid who obviously doesn't have a choice.
Right.
And this is and the parents are actively choosing to have a child this way.
Mm-hmm.
Actively, this is a choice that they're making. So now I have to say, I love that, obviously what these parents were, actively, their tactics, I obviously 100% disagree with. And it makes me very sick to my stomach. And anybody watching this on YouTube watched my face like almost throw up as you were describing that. But I still do appreciate so much that you were actively communicating with empathy. Because I do think that is needed if we're going to get recipient parents to start helping unravel the unethical behavior of the infertility industry. We need recipient parents on our side, and the only way to do that is to empathize with them. So I have to say that, like, I appreciate the fact that you were empathizing with them and not just going like, I mean, obviously as a therapist, you're not going to go like, fuck you, but like,
no.
I do agree with that tactic. I do think that it is needed. And I know that
honestly, it wasn't a tactic because it was but I see what you're saying. Like, I guess in when I'm thinking, I was actually had experienced infertility myself.
Yeah.
So I had been through those and kind of was still in the cusp of it. Like at the, I was still sort of in the middle of it, to be honest, in 2010. We'd already adopted my daughter and she was 5, but I still wanted that third child. I was still dealing with the grief. So I had a lot of empathy because I was living that world too. So I literally was in both worlds, like totally in both worlds. I had been through infertility and wanted another child.
Yeah.
Knew how hard it was to adopt. We did it and knew international adoption was over. Domestic adoption was tough. So I got it. Like I did really empathize, truly.
So I think right now we are just like fully entering into your book. So let's
Yeah.
just start saying that. So Jana is a fantastic author of the book Three Makes a Baby, which if you are watching this video on YouTube, you can see it right behind her. Yeah, that's
There it
it.
is.
There it is.
Yes.
It's available on Amazon. Please get it. It's a very, very easy read. If you're a quick reader, you'll read it in a couple hours. If you need to take time, it's going to take you a day. It's very, it's easy to consume. But let's
That
go.
was my goal.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely nailed it. And I think this is the book that if you are thinking about donor conception or you have already a donor conceived child, please purchase this. Please, this is absolutely a must. This is a step in the right direction. But since we're essentially talking about the book anyway, let's just at least name what we're talking about. So let's talk about infertility trauma, because I don't think that is highlighted and talked about enough. How would you describe infertility trauma?
Yeah, the best way I would describe it is really with a word: complicated grief.
Mm-hmm.
Complicated grief is an experience where, and we can experience it for many different losses, not just infertility, but it happens after we've had multiple losses that pile up on each other, for lack of a better way to say it,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have time to process the loss
Yeah.
and fully grieve it. And infertility is a complicated grieving process because
Yeah.
it's not just one loss. So if it's there's multiple losses that can happen along the way, whether it's a loss of a procedure doesn't work, a loss of a baby,
Yeah.
loss of control, loss of income. There's so many losses, and I name those, but uh, that becomes a form of grieving and trauma that a lot of people don't recognize as such.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have other losses, like a loss of a loved one, we have a formalized way to recognize that and support each other. A funeral, and bringing food, and just there's ways we come together.
Mm-hmm.
For infertility, it's a very isolating and lonely loss and grieving process, and people aren't there to support you. Um, Especially back in 2010, it's gotten better, but that was before Instagram. So
And also, I mean,
uh,
2010 was not that long ago. It really, really wasn't. Um, and I'm just still a little stuck on the fact that even in 2010, doctors were saying you don't need to tell your kid. I mean, I know that was like the norm in the 80s and 90s, but in 2010. So now, if somebody has infertility trauma, why would you? Why as a therapist would you recommend talking to somebody first before immediately just doing donor conception without talking to somebody? Like, what are the benefits of getting treated for infertility trauma before you start looking into donor conception?
yeah, well, I say that that grief time travels, and when I say that, what I mean is it gets passed on through families, and so trauma that's like infertility trauma can actually show up in your parenting and in the way you parent your child, and it can get passed on. So if you haven't fully come to terms with that infertility grief, the losses that you
Mm-hmm.
experienced, especially if you're going to use a donor or adopt, and you've lost that genetic connection to your child, then you it could show up in ways that you don't even realize that it's showing up.
In what
Um,
kind of ways could it show up? Like, what's a couple of examples?
yeah, an example would be that you notice that your child's different than you expected. Like you had that child that you thought was going to be like you, and then you end up with a child who's different. They don't have the traits that you expected them to have. Maybe they're not interested in the same things you're interested in. And so you begin to recognize that, and you try to steer them away from who they really are. Maybe you try to get them to be more like you, or be into a hobby that you do because you would have something in common. So you don't recognize them for who they are because you're still hanging on to that dream child that you thought you wanted, you wanted, but it
That
didn't
you
come true.
spent a lot of money on as well.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so you begin to maybe resent the child.
Commodification of
Yeah,
children.
yeah. And then you resent maybe the child's differences. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
you were like, dang, this isn't the child that I wanted. And maybe you take it out on the child, or maybe you're harder on them, or maybe you expect more of them. So that's just a way that your grief can show up,
Mm-hmm.
in not coming to terms and not accepting the losses and the different child that is coming. because it's not going to be the child that you thought was coming.
Yeah. So why would you tell your child that they're donor conceived? How would you phrase that? When a parent comes to you and they're like, well, why should I tell them?
Yeah. Well, I tell people, yeah, I'm sure that you believe in modeling honesty and establishing trustworthiness. And that if you want a relationship, remember, we spend most of our time in relationship with our kids. We will in an adult to adult relationship, not, those 18 years go by fast. Then if you value that, then it's important to be honest from the start and to model that to them and, show them how to respond to any challenges that might come their way.
I love that answer. That makes me so happy. Oh,
Yeah.
I love it. So when you say also from the start, because this is something that gets asked all the time on my TikTok and all the time on my social media is, when is the best time to tell your child that they're donor conceived?
Yeah, like right away, as soon as they're a baby, like as soon as they come out, even during pregnancy, because, really, because you just want to start talking about it. You want it to be just like this conversation that we're telling our story. When we've been through something, it is helpful to tell the story, So tell the story, start talking about it. And I know that's hard because there's shame and there's secrecy and there's like embarrassment maybe, but I think
but that's also why you need to get treated for infertility traumas to work through that shame.
That's right. To work through it. And remember, telling our story is how we heal from it as well. With trusted people. You don't have to go out to the internet and tell it, but you can if that works too, like I have.
Now, and I'm right there with you. So how, and again, I get this question all the time. So you're looking at your 3-year-old, you're looking at your 2-year-old. How do you have that conversation? How do you go like, hey, you're a sperm donor baby? Like, how do you have that conversation when they're that little?
Right. Well, when they're that little, you're using age appropriate language. So you are forming a concept. So it's like, hey, we needed help to have you. We tried hard. We got help to have you. And we're so glad you're here. You can, when they're a baby, you can even say things like, you can tell the story. They may not get it. Like, we used our friend Kiki as a donor, or we used, a person that helped us make you is somebody we don't know yet, but maybe we'll know them someday. So there's ways that you can sort of just start telling the story. You can do it with children's books that use that age appropriate language from the time they're little.
Would you have recommendations of those books for our wonderful listeners?
Absolutely. My favorite is, so when they're really little, and I don't know of any board books yet. So that's the only thing. So the little ones might tear it up. You might need to get a couple copies, but is Happy Together children's book, because, and the author has a lot of different variations of stories. So 2 moms, 2 dads, solo mom, a surrogacy story.
Oh, so, I love the inclusivity. Yes.
Yes. And, she's got those, and those are great because they just form the concept that we're a family. We needed help to have you. We went to the doctor and got help, and we love you so much. And that's the beginnings, right? And you don't have to go into IVF. You don't have to go into sperm and egg if you don't want to. You can wait until they're just a little bit older, and they can start to understand those terms, because it's just about that concept. So keeping it simple early on.
I love this. Warms my little DCP heart. Okay. What if I'm right now just totally going off of themes of your book. When a social parent, and for anybody who doesn't know, a social parent is the non-biological parent. What would you say to the parent, and if they don't feel like a real parent?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. So that's something that comes up almost right out of the gate, is even before they've done the procedure, is I'm so afraid I'm not going to be the real parent. Here's how it really comes up. I am so afraid they're going to say to me, you're not my real parent. You're not my real mom. You're not my real dad.
Oh my God.
And
for the record, like, I've never even once thought that about my social father, my dad. I've never once in my entire life as a DCP, never once thought that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to speak for all donor conceived people, but like, not even a flash in my head, even like when my dad and I was screaming at my dad, never once a second.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like the parent is the person that's there for you every day. So, but I will say my daughter said this to me when she was really little. I was expecting it when she was in her teenage years, but she said it before the age of 6. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. She's like, you're not my role model. I was so glad that I was prepared for it because
Yeah.
I didn't overreact. I was just like, well, of course I'm your real parent, but like, are you just mad that you might be mad right now that asked you to clean your room? But if you'd like to talk about your birth mom, like, let's do that too. I'm open to that. So it's like this stay calm confidence.
Calm confidence.
Yeah.
Calm confidence, guy. I love that. Calm confidence. Oh my God, I'm going to use that the next time I'm dealing with trolls online. Calm confidence.
Right.
Oh,
you might have to remind me to do the same.
Ugh.
So,
yeah. All right.
I know.
So we've gone over the fear of if I don't feel like a real parent. What happens? What about people who worry about like what if people are going to treat our family differently?
Yeah. The social aspect is huge. Huge. And I talked to a lot of couples before they've even chosen donor conception. So they're infertile. They've been through IVF after IVF and the eggs aren't working. Their sperm isn't working. They've done microtesting, which it finds sperm. They've done everything under the sun. And they're contemplating the use of a donor. And that's one of their biggest fears is none of my friends are going through this. I don't have anybody to talk to about this.
One, bullshit, they absolutely are. Let's just be honest.
Right. And that's the truth.
Yeah,
they are
they
because so many people are not talking about it, but they are going through it as well. Oh, yeah. It's so common. So I think that feeling is super powerful for a lot of people. And that feeling of not fitting in. And, I think the best thing you can do is remind them that there are people that are going through it, like you said, that they can talk to. They may not be in their neighborhood. And that this is the hardest part. Their story is going to be different, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's okay. So there's an acceptance that has to come with it. And that takes some therapy sometimes to get to that place of acceptance. And that's what I talk about is I try to welcome people to the land of differences. Here we are, let's embrace it and not reject our story. Because when we reject our story, when the parents are rejecting their story, which is, I couldn't have a biological child, but I'm going to pretend like it is, that's rejecting your story. That's self-rejection. That's rejecting your own family story. And that is not going to send a good message to your child.
It's also going to reject your child because your child can't get away from that truth of how they were made. Right. It's literally their DNA, and you're rejecting the story. You are rejecting the child.
Exactly. You're right. And you can that can send the message to the child that they should reject the parts of themselves that aren't like you. Right. And yes, oh my God, yes. And yes, this can happen in biological families. The first answer I get when I say this to people, that happens in biological families too. True, but we're not talking about biological families. And there's an added element of complexity with donor conceived families or adoptive families in which that they actually are different genetically.
It's always a thing that, I always get is like, there's plenty of people go like, well, there are some, people who don't have their medical history that have biological family members. I'm like, yeah, sure. But there wasn't a multi-billion-dollar industry that profited off of your creation. That's a big difference.
That's a huge difference. And I think that's what people don't realize is that this is being done on purpose. This isn't, I don't have systematic history because, I don't have it because, it didn't work out and my father ran off. No one can control that. We can have some say in what is happening in a industry that's profiting from the creation of these families.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah. You see, this is why, again, and I hope all you followers can understand why I absolutely love talking to Jana. Anytime Jana and I get to get on the phone, I'm like, all right, we're going to get my vodka. I'm going to talk to Jana and this is going to be so good. You guys I love it. Okay. What have you learned from your recipient parents since you've been doing this now? What are things that you have learned about donor conception and the infertility industry and infertility trauma and donor conceived people? What have you learned that has surprised you?
What my head first goes to is how unfortunate it is that there that people that are coming into that are experiencing infertility, the shame and the isolation and the loneliness of it, that then are going to fertility providers for a solution, that they feel so helpless and at the mercy of the providers, which are also doing wonderful things. Of course, they're creating babies that maybe that the couples wouldn't be able to have in a different time.
Yeah.
So I get that it's miraculous, but what I hear time and time again from my clients is how the providers and the medical model has failed them in so many ways. And from and there's the lack of information that they're getting.
Yeah.
So I think there's so much, I have so many dreams about what can be improved, in this process of helping people, from the beginning and informing them properly. Because what else I've learned is that once they do get that knowledge, many parents and information, because it started to happen about 3 years ago, that I started to see a shift and a change where most of my parents now that come to me, my intended parents, are going to tell. So I have seen progress.
That is so fantastic to hear. Yeah.
Because they're getting the information. Of course, they're also coming to me, so maybe they've heard that I'm all about telling. But they're getting that information now, and so what I'm seeing is parents that they really want to do what's best. They really do. They are hungry for information. And they are.
I've seen that as well. Like, I get so many DMs from recipient parents going like, I really want to make sure that I'm good, because I'm like, the amount of DMs I get that are like, I have a 6-month-old donor conceived child. I'm so scared. I already screwed everything up. Oh my God, I don't want to traumatize my kid. What do I have to do? And it's like, oh my God, pumpkin, bless your heart.
I know.
Oh. And I always tell them, I'm like, look, the fact that you're just messaging me and the fact that you're showing this much like care and worry tells me everything I need to know. Like, look,
that's what I say too.
Yeah, I'm like, exactly. I'm like, it's the parents who are, it's the parents who are like, why do we have to do that? Then I'm like, oh my God, the lack of humility is delightful. But
yeah. There's other things. I mean, I early on screened egg donors too. I don't do that anymore, but I did for about, probably about 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much about that end of it, the donors side too. So it was really fun. I got to be in this position of seeing the recipient parents and the donors at, like not the same time, but I would talk to each of them separately.
Yeah. Well, what did you learn from that experience?
Well, I learned that most egg donors that I met with, for one, I was educating them at a level where I was going into detail about how their future, the child that was born from their donation might feel.
And this was a surprise?
Yeah, they didn't know. They thought, oh no, it's not my kid. Like, and it was like, but the child
literally your biological child
may feel differently than that. And they're like, really? Oh, okay. Because they were just young, and so they didn't understand. Yeah, right? I had one tell me that it was like donating blood, and I was like, wait, no.
The top 2 comments I get about egg donation are, it's just donating blood, or it's just like giving up a period. And I'm like, wait,
not
even a little bit. Not even how the level of compartmentalization and disassociation is absolutely delightful. I love it. And I get this from donors all the time. And whether that's egg or sperm donors, it's the amount of times where you literally have to spell out to them, it is your biological child.
Yeah.
And it's like they're and it's like they're realizing it for the first time. And it's like,
it's true.
And I will say, like, I do blaze. Yes, I that was a combination of blame/place. So I blaze.
I like it. Yeah.
Yes, I blaze the clinics and cryo-banks because they work so hard at keeping that away from the donors. They actively do not want them to think about the donor conceived child. All they want them to think about is your spring break that you're about to pay for, your books, your student loans, because it is college students most of the time. Because hey, they like to set up pop-up stands on college campuses. I've spoken to donors who are like, yeah, they came into my lecture hall at the end of class. Like, it is terrifying. So let us move into the industry a little bit more, because you have been actively trying to work with the industry longer than a lot of people have. And you have been negotiating with clinics, cryo-banks, and ASRM. ASRM, for anyone who doesn't know, is the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. They are the ones who basically constitute the guidelines for the clinics and cryobanks to follow within the United States. Now, I need to underline the word guidelines. These are not regulations. Right. These are guidelines. They are optional for these places to follow. So, how has your dealings with ASRM been?
Yeah, well, okay. I have when I came into this business, I would say I was naive. I had my lived experience, and I knew the guidelines, the ASRM guidelines. I joined ASRM right away in 2010. And I was shocked to see that the guidelines weren't being followed for the most part. So like clients would come to me and they would tell me things, and I would be like, well, hang on, your doctor told you, it says here in the guideline that we recommend, the ASRM recommends disclosure. Disclosure means tell your child. It says right here, like I wouldn't hold that up to them, but to myself. And then, but your doctor told you it's no big deal. It's don't worry about it. It's your kid. You don't have to say anything. What the hell's going on?
So like, immediately, honestly, I was
like, what the hell's going on? And I remember it was just me, because I was independent, and I would go to my husband, and he's worked in healthcare a long time. And I was like, what's going on here? And help me because this is, and I would just get so, my mind would be blown, but I'd have no one to talk to about it. That what the things I saw, the things I heard happening, it was so frustrating to feel like, is it anybody else seeing this? Like, does anybody else know what's going on? And how can this be going on? How can this be happening?
And again, I want to underline, this was in 2010. This was not the 1980s. This is not the 1990s. This was just over 10 years ago. So anybody listening, this was very recent.
Well, and so what would happen is, like, I would do a report. So I would see, I'd see an egg donor, and I would get a result that would be questionable. Like to do an evaluation on an egg donor, you do an interview, and then you do an objective test, like the MMPI, sometimes the PAI. Back then I was doing MMPI, and I was using Dr. Caldwell himself, who is like wrote books on, like he did the MMPI for like Jeffrey Dahmer or something. I mean, like this guy is a master. Like, I hate that his name came up in this conversation. But he's a master at it, so he wrote all these books. So I was using him for the reports. And I would get the report back, and it would be iffy. And I'd call an egg agency, and I would be like, hey, this person may have bipolar disorder. No judgment on that. It's just something that the parents would need to know.
Yeah, that's genetic.
And they have indications for it. I had one interview with them. What do you know about him? I had an agency just basically berate me and tell me that I didn't know what I was doing. Why did therapists all love to use the MMPI and think it's so great? And she wasn't a clinician. She wasn't a therapist. She was an owner of an egg bank. And she literally just said, just tell me yes or no. Are you going to pass this person or not? So that was the sentiment that I was getting. You're going to pass them or not? And so what I remember telling my husband, and he goes, honey, they want a rubber stamp is what they want. And I'm like, what the heck? He's like, they just want someone to say, boom, pass. And I'm like, I do not, that does not compute. So I mean, it just, I don't know. For my personality, that does not compute.
No. And for you, you're like, well, that's information that a recipient parent and a donor conceived child is gonna need to know. Like there's no genetic test for bipolar disorder. Like that's something that you would need to know ahead of time. It would be for their medical history. Yeah.
And I had parents that I would say on the report, this, the donor is prone to depression, and the independent parents would be like, no problem. We have that in our family too. great. This isn't about judging someone and saying you can't do something.
No,
This is
no, no.
about information sharing.
This is informed consent.
Yeah.
Informed consent. Anybody who has obviously listened to me talk about this a lot knows that when it comes to saying yay or nay to donors, my issue is like I honestly don't give it. I do not care. I personally think that sure, whatever, there shouldn't be genetic medical differences that should be stopped. That to me isn't the reason to stop a donor from donating. To me, it is the most important thing is about informed consent. All of us have things in our family tree. Every one of us does. Like, that's cool. But
Absolutely.
You need to have that information to properly take care of your child, because as we talked about, once the donation is done, potentially you are completely cut off from that donor and that information is gone. That means you are not going to have that information. And we have both heard, we've talked to recipient parents, we've talked to donor-conceived kids of horror stories when it comes to diagnostic issues and children suffering needlessly for years. And all they needed to know in their donor profile was has bipolar disorder. That's all they needed to know.
Or prone to it, yeah.
Or prone to it, so that the child could get a proper diagnosis or proper help when they get older and potentially start showing signs.
Absolutely.
Again, that can be life-changing. That can be life-changing.
Change the whole trajectory.
Yes.
Really. Mental illness is difficult to diagnose.
Yeah.
And it takes time, and it takes understanding.
Yeah.
Of genetics and tendencies. That's why doctors collect that information every time you go. I just went last week for a checkup. Family health history again. Like, they're always updating. Hey, we updated our system. We need you to fill out 10 pages of paperwork again. So there it is, the family history. I mean, they're collecting it for a reason, not for fun.
I mean, every time I go in, they always are like, well, what's your health history? Do you have any history of like high blood pressure, heart attack? And I always make it very clear that it's like half of my medical history is gone. I don't have half of it. I'm sperm donor conceived every single time. And I'm very lucky that the doctors who I work with are great. And they're like, no problem, we'll run extra tests. That's fine. And I'm very lucky about that. But I really drive that point home. And they are very receptive to the fact that, okay, she doesn't know. And they don't shrug that off. They're great. And that has literally saved my life at times.
Yeah.
Even the ability to say, I don't know, and for them to be aware of that has saved my life because they've done extra tests.
That's great. Yeah. I didn't know anything. And so I remember just always being such a mystery to myself. Like, I don't know. What are they going to find? And then when I was able to do a DNA test and find out like I'm BRCA negative, I was just like, I cannot tell you the relief, just because having no idea for so long and having some bit of information, it's amazing how you think about these things more than people realize.
I think it's one of those things where until it affects you, you don't know.
It's true.
And if you're lucky enough, you won't ever be like affected by it. But for the people who have gone through diagnostic hell, they understand like the literal just torture it can be. But let's go back to dealing with ASRM and clinics and cryo-banks. So again, you're saying you started off and you were in your words a bit naive. You're starting to learn like, oh shit, there seems to be a massive lack of care. As you said, they just wanted the rubber stamp. What else did you start to find and discover?
Well, there was just a complete lack of education, even in like physicians' offices. Not, and again, I would have experiences where I would go in and try to convince them, here's some education that your patients need. And it was just sort of dismissed. And I think their priority was getting people pregnant. So
because that's where the money is.
Yeah. And they didn't have the time to go into the education, but I just came just a lot of dead ends. I would just knock on doors and go visit with doctors and try to get them to start incorporating education and counseling. So the other thing that there was this real, we talked about secrecy before and how they benefited from secrecy. I was shocked at the almost culture of secrecy that had settled in. There was one story of a family that, or a couple, they couldn't have a child, and a friend of theirs had, and I'm going to change up the details a little bit. A friend of theirs had was going to be a donor, and it was like more of an acquaintance. They knew this person through, not really close friends. They came to me, and in my mind, I'm like, that's a known donor. You know the person. And I said, do you want to meet with that person? Do you know that person? Do you want to have a session with them too? Let's talk about the details here. Let's go into how are you going to tell your child? How are you going to tell each other? How are you going to manage the relationship over time? Just lots of things you have to talk about if it's a known donor. Absolutely not. They wanted no part of that, because in their minds, it wasn't. It was going to be anonymous. They weren't going to tell the kid the truth.
Oh my God.
So I wrote the report as I saw it, just exactly what happened. This is a known donor, and they declined to have a session with the donor for further implications of how to get on, and that they were counseled according to ASRM guidelines. I got a very angry practice manager call me from a clinic. How dare I put that this was a known donor in the report? This was an anonymous donor. And I said, no, they know the person. That's a known donor. No, it is not. It is going to be anonymous. I said, but there's a difference between whether anonymous meaning anonymous means you don't know the person. They are unknown.
But this is a known, but they literally know this person. She
literally said, fine, I'm going to throw your report in the trash and we'll redo it. And that's what they did. They threw it in the trash because I didn't change the wording.
God.
They demanded that they demanded to change the wording to make it say anonymous. And I wouldn't.
Ew.
That's not what it was. They threw it in the trash. Never heard from it again.
Oh.
This happened time and time again with agencies, egg agencies that I would be a screen for.
Mm-hmm.
I would screen their donors. And if I didn't pass a donor for legit reasons, according to the ASRM guidelines, they wouldn't call me back again. They would never use me again.
Interesting. So because you were following the ASRM guidelines, they didn't want to work with you anymore. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that started, the first few times it happened, I was like, yeah, maybe it's just a coincidence. And then it kept happening. And I was putting all these pieces together, and I was like, this is shady. There's some shady stuff going down.
How many, just a ballpark, but how many times do you think you experienced that?
I have no idea, because one way I coped with it without just wanting to quit. Well, let me just be honest. I have wanted to stop doing this work 24 times, if not more, over the past 10 years because of the stuff I've seen.
Yeah.
It's been so appalling and upsetting to me that it was hard to even be part of it in any capacity. So the way I coped with it was to move on and just be like, you know what? If they're not going to work with me, fine. There'll be people that will eventually. But when I said this in my book, when I finally decided a couple years in, I think it was 2014 or so, I was like, I'm going to tell people right away that I follow the ASRM guidelines, and I believe that you should be open with your child. So when they call me and they say, hi, I'd like to have a counseling session, I'm going to tell them right then, that's great. I want you to know in honesty, in the spirit of being open, I am going to tell you that you need to be open with your child. Okay, never mind. We'll find someone else. Click.
Oh my God.
I lost 80% of my business that year that I said that I began to say to people up front before they even came to my office, you need to be open with your child.
You lost 80%?
My business tanked that year. I couldn't have supported myself financially.
Oh my God. The fact, okay, hold on.
It was intended parents would call me and say, my doctor says I need to do this session. And I would say, okay, out of the gate, I need you to know I'm aligned with the ASRM, and they say you need to be open. They wouldn't come see me because they didn't want to hear that.
So actively clinics, cryobanks, and recipient parents.
I would say mostly recipient parents.
Mostly recipient parents. Just done. No, not working with you.
And that was like 2014, 2015. So we're talking, that wasn't that long ago. And so there's been great changes, you know, in the most recent years. But it was really difficult to get that message across. And for most of the time I've done
oh my God. That's...
It's shocking, isn't it? I know. And yet
it's not like obviously that's never good. Like the fact that happened is never good, but I'm just, the fact that happened in less than 10 years ago is terrifying to me. Is terrifying because we constantly, as you certainly well know, we have this constant anybody who works with who at least attempts to work with the industry with, like, you know, negotiations and everything, we're constantly being pushed down our throats like, oh no, the industry is great now, everything's awesome, look at all the improvements we've made, look at everything we've done, it's all hunky-dory, and like it's awesome. But then you find out, like, no, it's not. There's still all of these problems that still exist within donor conception. It isn't. And I don't know about you, but I'd love to get your opinion on it. People ask me constantly, is the infertility industry better now than what it was? And for me, I finally feel like it hasn't. I feel like it isn't better. I feel like they've only gotten better at lying. That's at least how I feel, but I would love to know what your opinion is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's a complex question, but let me tell you this as an example that might help. To clarify too, when you said cryobanks stopped working with you. I want to be clear. Cryobanks have never worked with me.
Got it. Okay.
Only agencies and clinics, because cryobanks sperm banks weren't doing psychological testing. So they weren't coming to me. Sperm donors were not doing psychological testing.
So they were only doing this with egg banks?
Yes.
Only egg banks. Why only egg banks and not sperm banks?
Because egg donors, the process of retrieving eggs is much more involved. And so But
the result is still the same.
It is. But they're investing a lot in those donors. And they're coming in and getting, you know, medicine and shots, and they have to come on in a schedule. So they have to be stable and reliable. And so egg donors were psychologically screened, but sperm donors were not.
And I just want to underline this one. This was them following, I'm going to say, ASRM guidelines, but legally, because this is always a big question that I get. Egg donors are not legally held to a higher standard than sperm donors, but it does seem like egg donors are put through more.
They are. And the reason is because sperm donation, sperm cryobanks did not do objective testing on sperm donors when I was doing so from 2010 to, and I don't have the dates on when they started to do that. They were not doing, so they were doing temperament tests like the Kiersey test. And some of them still just do the temperament test. That is not going to find pathology. That's just going to be like, kind of like what is the person like? What are they into? What is their temperament?
But the result is still the same. I mean, both sperm donors and egg donors are still just as much of a biological parent. If they understand the importance of doing this with egg donors, how do they not copy and paste with sperm donors?
Well, sperm donation started before egg donation did. And psychological testing wasn't done. It was like, you know, med students, they would grab and use. And so they didn't have anyone to really answer to because, you know, and I don't know the internal workings. The first time I spoke with anybody at a sperm bank was last year.
What?
And I've been doing this since 2010.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they weren't transparent. I knew nothing about them. It was like trying to, you know, you couldn't get, they didn't share information.
Okay. Can I ask, is there sexism and misogyny behind that? Because that's what it certainly feels like.
It seems more like it's a business model difference, and that sperm donation is so much easier to collect. And there is so there you have to remember with egg donors, there was an investment in
Yeah.
these donors, and they had an initial investment and they didn't want to lose on that investment. And that means agencies, clinics, anyone involved with the recruiting of the egg
Mm,
donor, and then the medicine and the protocol and matching of the parent. Egg donation was done in fresh cycles at first, so they would literally match a couple to a donor, and they would cycle together. So it was a much bigger investment. Where with sperm donation, they could grab it, freeze it, and keep it until someone needed it. It's a very different process.
yeah. And for anyone
Yeah.
who's like curious, like egg donation, I mean, the egg donor is taking a series of shots every day for like a month. So, I mean, yes, it is a much bigger
Yeah.
investment, whereas sperm donors, they can literally do the donation in their car. Like,
Mhm.
it's not a big thing. They've been practicing since they were 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very
And
different process.
yeah, and the egg donors, yeah, and they so they did have to go through more psychological testing and
Yeah.
clearance before they could move forward with donation, for sure.
Oh my God. Okay. So, what are aspects of the industry that you would really want recipient parents to understand? As somebody who's now worked in the industry, tried to negotiate with the industry, what would you try and tell recipient parents that like this is something you need to understand about how the industry works?
Um that you may not get all the answers that you want, and that the one thing I say to most recipient parents is, when you are going to select your donor is
Mhm.
when you have the most power. Because after you purchase that donor, that their gametes, that that's it. You don't, like, you can go back, you can request information, but the door might close in your face. So I encourage parents to ask questions and kind of demand what they need at that point in the
Mhm.
process. The problem is they're not educated. Often they don't have that education. When I say not educated, I mean no one's informed them
Yeah.
of what they need to know. So
Yeah.
they don't even know what they don't know. And so they don't know what to ask, and they don't realize that they have that power at that moment.
Again, our big theme with today's episode is secrecy. Too much
Yeah.
secrecy.
Yeah, so much secrecy. And so social media, especially Instagram, was sort of the bank's biggest nightmare.
Yeah, it
Especially sperm
was.
banks. Hmm. And
Oh,
DNA testing.
oh, I mean, no
DNA
one
testing.
saw
That's a bigger.
23andMe and Ancestry coming.
Yeah.
Like that was, I mean, if you told us in the 90s that like one day you're going to be able to spit in a tube and they're going to tell you your ancestry and you can find relatives, we'd be like, okay, Star Trek. Like, sure.
Right.
That's it. Yeah, that's 100%
Yeah.
going to exist. Like that, we did not see that coming.
Yeah. But thank God. I mean, I'm so thankful that people like donor conceived people and adoptees have access to that information now. I'm so glad they do.
So the industry is, and we it's a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yes.
They're, as we've obviously covered, it's their purpose is they want to make money. That's what they want. Getting people pregnant equals money.
Mm.
Are there ways in which you have found that they are really going after that buck that, sorry, I'm gonna rephrase that question. We know that this is a for-profit industry. We know that the only way that they make money is by getting people pregnant. Are there ways in which you have found that they pad the bill that parents might not realize or that we may not realize? Because again, they work in secrecy and we need to take that veil back. Are there things that you have found that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, I know it's kind of like the beginning. I know you asked the question, has it gotten better? And I was told last year that they are doing psychological testing on sperm donors now.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's not regulation. It's not
The problem
regulation.
is,
Just want to make sure
yeah.
everyone understands that.
The problem is, my husband always says this, it's a fox watching the hen house.
Mhm.
You know, if you're doing in-house psychological testing in the bank by persons salaried by the bank,
Yeah.
how can they be objective?
Yeah.
So that's tricky. But but there's other ways that what's so hard about it is that I get it in my information from my clients direct. So they're going through and many of them don't know any better. So then when they're telling me, oh, this is what I got from the bank, this is their first time with this. So it is not like they've gotten all this information and now they're coming to me to report some news. No, like they're just telling me innocently. So I'll hear things like as they're happening, and I have to do detective work and put things together and be like, wait a minute. Why are you paying more for a donor of color, a sperm donor of color?
Whoa!
Why is it so much?
Whoa!
Yeah, and so I've been like, what's going on there? And so I always put the detective hat on first. Like, let me make sure I'm trying to get the facts. I don't want to jump to conclusions but that's the problem with secrecy. With secrecy, you cannot. There's so many unknowns that it's like you can't trust. You just can't trust. And that's what's so frustrating is they're almost their own worst enemy in that way, because this information gets out. The other thing I've heard recently.
I'm sorry. My throat is in my stomach. My stomach is in my throat. They had to pay more to get a donor of color.
Yes, I've heard that from several clients that their vials of sperm were priced higher. Now, whether that's still going on or not, I have no idea.
What year was this?
That happened, I believe that was last year.
Okay, well, I mean, that's not long ago.
Oh, that's what I'm saying, but that's how mysterious it is. It literally changes. Like, I'll find out about a new thing they're doing from a client that tells me, oh, they're charging different prices for different vials now. Now they're doing a vial for different, like each procedure is different. For ICSI,
yes,
it's a certain vial. For IUI, it's a different vial. And so what I've deduced, what I guessed was that they're spreading out the man's sperm more. So in an ICSI, you only need a couple sperm. You don't need, I don't know actually the amount you need in that vial, but you only need one sperm to inseminate and to fertilize an egg. And so there's probably less in an ICSI. I did speak to a bank and they said there's more in an IUI vial than an ICSI vial. And then IVF has a different number of sperm. So they're finding a way where it's not just like the same amount of sperm per vial anymore. They're getting more out of each guy. More ICSI is being done than ever before.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm still a little traumatized right now. Because I'd like to specifically talk more about your patients who are part of the BIPOC community. Because I think that this is unbelievably important and it is not talked about enough. But can you talk a little bit more about the experiences your patients have had with dealing with the infertility community who are not white? Who are part of like the BIPOC community.
So what I hear time and time again is that the selection of donors is very limited.
Yeah.
For people within the community, and so they don't have much choice. And then that's when
so
it
terrifying.
Really is hard.
It's so scary.
What I think really bothered me was the idea that you didn't have much choice, but you also had to pay more. That one, that threw me for a loop.
Fucking Christ! Oh my God!
Yeah. And supply demand, I guess. I don't know where that would be the argument. Again, this is information I got from clients, so I cannot confirm this because I never spoke with the bank about this. I want to be clear, I cannot confirm this.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna throw up for a bit.
No.
Okay, all right. Yep, nope, the information needs to be said. Okay, sorry.
Yeah. But that is the experience, is that there are limited donors to choose from. And so it's can be a longer process for them to go through that donor selection process. If that donor falls through for whatever reason, maybe the genetic, they don't have a genetic matchup. They both have are carrier for a disorder, or for some reason, like in an egg donation situation, the eggs don't work. Talk about like lengthening their process. So it can be really challenging for people of color.
Oh my God.
To find donors.
Oh, Jesus Christ. People who watch my TikTok know that I have a bell that I ring and I attach different Post-its to whenever I need to ring the important thing. And I really wish I had my bell right now and I had white supremacy just stapled on top of it so I could frickin' ring it right now. But oh my God. Okay. Okay. All right. So as we all kind of digest and we swallow that, and it is something that I would really, really appreciate if parents who are looking to be recipient parents, when you are going through the donor catalog, because I know that you're specifically focusing on looking for your donor, look at the diversity of the donors. And if you're noticing a massive lack of diversity in that clinic or cryobank, please don't use them. Please don't fucking use them. I beg you, please don't. This behavior has to stop, and the only way to stop it until we can get some freaking laws put in is affect their bank account. Stop using the clinics and cryobanks that do not show that they have diversity. I beg of you, please stop. Sorry, that was my just very angry rant. There was a story you also recently shared with me about a new tactic that I believe you said a cryobank was using, and I would love for you to share this new tactic, because it to me, I'm not a lawyer, but it really seems like extortion.
Jogging my memory here.
It was an exclusive donor.
Oh yes. Okay. Yes.
So I would love. Yeah,
a client told me.
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it's like one of those things. But if it quacks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's extortion.
Yeah. So, and again, these are things my clients tell me. Was that they had an option for an exclusive donor. An exclusive donor means that this is a sperm donor that only that family receives all of the donation that man has provided. So that means no other siblings, the potential for big sibling pods like you talk about out there that many people are worried about, that potential is eliminated.
Yeah, that banjo music out there that we're worried about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the latest thing I heard was that if the parents to be wanted this exclusive donor, they were going to have to buy all of his vials. And apparently he had something along the lines of 25 vials of sperm, and they're about $1,000 a piece. So roughly, and so they would have to spend that much money to have an exclusive donor.
So you're just dropping $25,000
on one donor,
on just the vials.
Just the vials. And you don't even know if it's going to work, if the procedure is going to work, or if you're definitely not going to need probably all of those vials.
No. And for you, the fact that you are being charged an exuberant amount of money to protect your child, you are... No. Oh my God. It's
taking advantage of people who are in such a difficult situation. They hear from you and from people that are donor conceived saying, guys, having 100 siblings is hard. Let's try to avoid this.
Like, this is,
and they say, I want to. And they go, okay, great. Here's an exclusive donor. The bank goes, we have a solution. Exclusive donor. Here you go. And it's that'll be $25,000, please.
Oh my.
That's not viable for people.
That's not
financially.
No. I mean, some people, it's exceptionally expensive just to afford a couple vials, let alone 25. And they
so they're having to make a choice between multiple, a big sibling pod of a large sibling pod for their child, or money they don't have going into debt. Just it's tough. It's I don't.
To quote my favorite
ethical.
No, to quote my favorite movie, Clue, flames. Flames.
Yeah.
Um, what, in your opinion, again, as somebody who's worked with the industry, what are our challenges moving forward to get this industry regulated? Like, why is this so challenging to get this industry regulated when it feels so common sense?
Because there are powerful groups that have been established for a long time that are actively blocking legislation and working against legislation to regulate. No industry wants to be regulated. None. I mean, it's just
Well,
no
we have a
industry wants to be
history of
regulated.
seeing that. Like, no, send the children down to the coal mines. They like it. It's like,
Right.
no.
So they'll fight. So companies and industries will fight with everything they have to not be regulated. The problem is if they can't regulate themselves,
Yeah.
then you've got to have some basic rules that encourage ethical practices. So I know it's kind of like unfortunate because I mean, I know there's some negative things to regulation, negative consequences of being regulated. But the pendulum has swung is too far in the other direction, and we've got to have some middle ground.
And what do you think, like, as consumers, as recipient parents, what are ways in which they can fight back? What can they do to fight back against this industry that is within their control?
Well, I believe you with their purchasing power. I think that's their biggest. If they can go in and demand that the banks raise the standards and provide what they're looking for, I think there's going to be arguments to that. The banks will say that they're going to have to raise prices, but I'll remind you, like what you said earlier, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So until I start seeing the profit margins of these banks,
Well,
I'm going to question
how
that
much?
a bit.
I mean, you already, as like $25,000 for an exclusive donor. Like, what? Okay, that's already not affordable. Fine, raise it to $1 million. It doesn't. No one's affording that anyway. I mean, it's like the prices are already comically high. They're already high with no regulations. I mean, I always kind of joke that it's like you're paying $1,000 for a vial and you don't even have a guarantee that it's not pancake batter. You get no guarantees already. I did read a review from your book because I was going through all the reviews and they're all extremely good. But you had one review that reminded me a lot of what donor conceived people are told a lot by the industry. Because donor conceived people were constantly trying to lobby for regulations and we're told no a lot. We're told no a lot. We're told that our opinion doesn't matter. It's not important. What matters the most to the industry and to the stakeholders is the recipient parents. Hands down, that's who they care about because that's who's paying for it. That's the pocketbook. And you had one comment that really reflected that for me. The comment said, this person, you, is obviously biased.
Yeah.
And I found that to be such an odd review on your book. And because they meant it in a negative way. And that's the comment we've also gotten from the industry and stakeholders is like, we can't listen to donor conceived people about donor conceived laws because you're too biased. And I find that to be...
That's weird logic.
It's very weird logic.
Because you are the ones who have the lived experience. You're the ones who are directly impacted by this practice. You're the ones who are the most knowledgeable about it. And so... yeah, and I would say everyone has biases, for one. I mean, to say you're biased is say you're human. So, of course, everyone has biases. That's kind of silly to me. But
well, also, I would say as recipient parents, you're also biased. why is that
Like I
bias
said,
being
everyone has
taken?
biases.
Why is that bias being taken more seriously than my bias, who actually has to
Yeah.
live with the consequences more than anyone else in in this equation?
Well, and it's always, it's interesting because to me that just says that when someone says that, I'm kind of looking at, are you ready to hear? And if I come across bias, then you're probably not ready to hear this yet.
Yeah.
And that means that your own biases are getting in the way. So ironically, what we call out someone else is usually what we're practicing ourselves.
Yeah.
Like if we're calling someone out and saying you're that, it's usually our disowned stuff. But if I want to learn about something, I'm going to go to the person who intimately knows that something, that topic.
I mean,
I'm not going to ask
yeah.
someone that doesn't understand it. If I truly want to know it and I truly understand what it's all about, I'm going to ask the person who has direct experience with it.
I mean, if
That's it.
I
It's
wanted
simple.
to learn ballet, I'm gonna go to somebody who's been a ballet dancer
Sure.
for years.
Yeah.
That's
But
I'm
if
not going
I
to go to
want,
a juggler. I'm going to go to a ballet dancer.
but if I want to hear what I want to hear, and I don't want to be told something that doesn't feel right, and I don't want to be told something that's going to make me uncomfortable, then I'm not going to go to that person that might be saying something that feels uncomfortable, and I'm going to call them, I'm going to discredit them. I'm going to say, now that person doesn't know what they're talking about because I'm not ready to hear that yet. It's not about me, it's about them, right? It's just easy to deflect like that. I mean, we've all done it. I've done it, I'm sure.
I mean, I feel like that lesson that you just said, I think could be copy and paste when we're talking about like any kind of human rights issue.
Yeah.
I feel like that is a very universal truth that we need to carry within us, not just for like obviously donor conception, but when listening to anybody with a different lived experience than us, who is marginalized in a way. So Jana, you are, as always, absolutely the best, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is going, holy shit, how do I get more Jana? Which I fully understand that sentiment, because everybody needs more Jana. So how can people get more Jana?
Yeah, well, I have a podcast out. I've been doing it since 2019. It's by the same name of the book.
Why your sound is so impeccable.
Yeah. And so I got thrown into that world because I was desperately wanting to keep this conversation going, and another podcast was going off the air. So find me there because I have over 70 episodes. I also am, my book. You can get my book. I'm online. I'm on social media at
And
Jana
you have a
Rupnow.
workbook, not just your book. You also have a workbook, so that's fabulous.
It's a companion guide to the book. And then I also you can find me on social media at Jana Rupnow LPC. LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counselor. So that is my credentials. And you can find me. And I'm constantly trying to keep the book fresh by adding stuff out there on social media, and even putting things like courses and parent education, because even though, like I am a child focused, I am all about teaching the parents, because it's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Like if we can get to the parents and educate and inform, and then they can start out the gate knowing some of the things to do and say and how to interact with their child, brilliant. We've made a world of difference for those kids.
And that is what, in my opinion, I mean, as much as I want the donor conceived people to lead the charge, and as we should, I do know we're not going to get anywhere without the recipient parents. We need the recipient parents to be backing us up because those are the only people that the industry is going to listen to. That's the only people that the stakeholders are going to listen to, is the recipient parents. They've made it very clear they don't give a shit about us. Made it very clear.
And I will remind you that the recipient parents and the donor conceived people, you are a family. You are the family that I care about, that I want to make healthy and well and happy, because it's not about, we're not saying donor conception doesn't work or people can't be happy. No, we're saying you absolutely can. I'm saying you absolutely can, but here are some things you need to know first that will help you in that process. And so by working together, parents and DCP, donor conceived people, you can make the biggest difference in the industry. You can demand change. So you're the power.
You are the power. And Jana, thank you again. It is always a freaking pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
It is always a pleasure. And everyone, please go follow Jana. For all of my recipient parents or soon-to-be recipient parents, please go purchase 3 Makes a Baby. It's an easy read. It should be a required textbook for anybody who is going to become a recipient parent. And even if your child is donor conceived and they're 30 years old, I would still suggest reading it. I think that there's still things that you could learn.
Absolutely. There's still emotional stuff that can be coming up. And I talk with parents when their kids are grown still. And I don't know if you want to, talk about International Donor Conception Awareness Day. The theme this year, it's on April 27th. The theme is truth and transparency. So everything we've been talking about goes so perfectly with that. We're encouraging parents to talk and tell their child. And if you haven't and your child's older, it's okay. It's not too late. And I do have tips for telling in middle school, in high school, and beyond. So it's never too late to tell and get some support if you need help.
That is absolutely wonderful. And to the parents who have not told their child yet and they're realizing, oh shit, we let's guide you through it. Contact Jana. There are tips, there are ways on how you can do it, but it's definitely like you gotta breathe deep and step into that path and start going down that one. But Jana, thank you again as always. You are a freaking star, and I am so glad we've got you on our team.
Thank you, Laura. So are you.
God. All right. Thank you all so much. And for everybody listening to Insemination, remember, we fully film this. So if you'd rather watch this, please go to YouTube. The entire episode is there waiting for you. Please follow on social media at Laura High Five everywhere, whether that's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and obviously YouTube. Also, I'm still learning how to do all of this stuff. Please write a review on the podcast thing because apparently that helps in this world, and I'd like for this to continue. Y'all are amazing. Go be awesome. Go spread like a sperm donor and no, don't do that. Actually, don't. I was gonna make a fun metaphor and it just turned really gross really fast. Just be a good person, guys. Just don't suck. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.